Hey guys, you are watching the In Third Person comic book show. I'm Jet from InThirdPerson.com, which is a website I run about video games, board games, comic books, and other nerdy pursuits. And today on the comic book show, I want to talk about one of my all time favorite comic book franchises, and that's the X Men. And in particular, I wanted to talk about the X Men going way back in time. But before we go there, we'll start in the present. Well, maybe not the present. I'd say the early 90s. I first fell in love with the X Men in the early 90s with the X Men cartoon. And it was at that point watching that show where I said, oh my goodness, what is this? I was used to not comic books, cartoons where it was just 30-minute episode and the story went from beginning to end. And with the X Men, it was just like the comics where it would be a persistent story carrying out throughout, and the characters were great, and it felt like something that was more mature than what I was watching at the time, and that was part of the draw for me. I actually remember the day that it debuted on Fox. I told my parents that Saturday or the Friday night before, wake me up at 6 a.m. because Fox's Saturday morning cartoon stuff started at 6 a.m. and I wasn't sure when they were going to run it. Yeah, they had TV Guide at the time, but I didn't check. Anyway, so I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the show didn't actually run till 11. So it was just 5 hours of me waiting in front of the TV. When's the show gonna come on? And then it finally did, and my mind just went, changed my life forever. When I actually started reading comic books earlier this year, I started with the all new X Men from Marvel Now, and it's one of my favorite series going. I read the trade paperbacks up till the Guardians of the Galaxy slash All New X Men, and then started reading the individual episodes issues from there. So I'm all caught up. And beyond that, I've jumped around different continuities or different eras of the X Men. So I've read Astonishing X Men, New X Men, the Mutant Genesis paperback, some stuff that took place a bit before that in this weird book. Let me grab that off the shelf over here. This book over here, which is, I don't know, X Men with Chris Claremont, Jim Lee, and Mark Silvestri doing some of it. It's a little weird. I'll do a separate show on this and the weirdness of this book another day. Um, Beyond that, I've read some Days of Future Past. We'll talk about that one as well another time. But today, we are going to cover specifically the X Men, going all the way back to the 60s, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. And this Marvel Masterworks book covers issues 1 through 10 of the original X Men run. And as much of a fan as I am of the X Men, I have to admit, I was kind of dreading reading this book. And that comes from my experience so far with reading comic books, where the older you go in terms of how old the publication is, the more it's aged. Where just writing for comic books in the 1960s or the 1970s is not what it is now. And it just hurts reading some of that stuff sometimes where it just is not aged. It's a lot more wordy. It's a lot more reliant on the writer to explain everything than having the pictures take care of stuff. And I've also read some things where people said this X-Men stuff, particularly Stan Lee's writing, not all that great, which is part of why it got canceled a few years in. But anyway, so my time reading this particular book. One of the things that really surprised me was just how much of the X-Men framework was established here and still carries on to this day. So, I mean, the original cast, Cyclops, the Beast, Iceman, Jean Grey, Angel, all there, and at a certain level, they're all kind of the same. So, Cyclops is still like the tragic leader who is tortured by his powers and not being able to live a human life, like the regular human life. The Beast is a super smart guy, but he's also, well, he's not really tormented by his looks at that point, but yeah, still a super smart guy who happens to also be really strong. Iceman is still kind of a goofball, and he looks really odd in the first few issues where he's just a giant snowman with a humanoid snowman with no real face. It wasn't until, I guess, later on in this book where he develops the power to go even colder, which makes him more shiny like ice, so he actually has a physique. That was a nice touch there by Jack Kirby to introduce that along the way. And yeah, just the general idea of here are these heroes which are mutants and humans hate them, and there are some mutants that are good and some that are bad. All of that was there, and that's cool. Like it shows the staying power of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's work. And the art in this is actually pretty good, all things considered. Like for the time, it's very colorful and it's very clear what's going on. I liked it. But yeah, it's also interesting to see like how much it's aged. So there's certain things like the Blob is a really goofy villain in here, just dumb, like, oh, I stand and you can't really hurt me. But of course, Cyclops can just kind of shoot the floor out from under you, and there's other silly ways they get to stop him. I think the biggest thing that was clearly aged is Magneto. And Magneto nowadays is one of the coolest villain slash anti-hero. Like he's a character with a lot of depth, and he grew up with as a tortured soul, living in really bad situations, and he's persecuted all his life. None of that's here. Magneto is just a dude who is a mutant with great metal powers, and he does not like humans and just wants to get rid of them. So his motivations are very paper thin, and he's just he's just another bad guy with very strong powers, which he puts to alright use here, but I the depth of the characters just isn't really there, and it doesn't really come out in Stan Lee's writing. Um, like some of the things, there's surface level stuff like Scott and Jean Grey's weird tension between each other. Like it reads very hokey, and there's some other weird stuff. Like there's one particular panel where Professor X kind of professes that he has a crush on Jean Grey, which is really weird. But he's thinking it to himself. She can't read minds or anything, so she doesn't know. And they kind of don't mention that ever again. I don't know where X-Men continuity goes from there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of swept that under the rug. Stuff like Cerebra is established there. I love, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, their complicated relationship with Magneto, that's kind of there too. And so, like, with historical context, I did like reading it from, at least for that, just to see, like, where all these things came from, and I'm kind of surprised how much of it's there. But, like, the depth of the characters and the stories that I think a lot of people identify with now, it's just not there. And that's okay. I mean, for the time, these were what they were, and if you have that historical context, you can probably enjoy it as is. Though, I mean, is it necessary to go all the way back here and read this stuff? Like maybe read about Unis the Untouchable, which almost looks like Anus but isn't, who's almost the exact same thing as the Blob? Maybe not. Like, I don't think you need to go back and read this stuff unless you really want to brush up on your X-Men history, and you need to know everything about Kazar and the first time the Avengers and the X-Men tag team together, and uh, yeah, it's not bad, but not my favorite X-Men as well. So that's it for the original X-Men book. I mean, this is a Marvel Masterworks collection. I don't think it's anything special. You could probably find this for super cheap in a random bookstore or just order it online. It's not bad. Definitely not my favorite X-Men book, though. So we're going to wrap it up here on this edition of the In Third Person Comic Book Show. We are definitely going to talk more X-Men, because, man, I love me some X-Men. And, well, till then, you guys can check out more videos on this channel, youtube.com/jetinthird-person. If you like the video, you can like it on YouTube. And you can check out my website, inthirdperson.com, for more comic book stuff, video game stuff, board game stuff, and more. So until next time, thank you so much for watching the In Third Person Comic Book Show, and I'll see you later. Bye.